Most people think they can read power when they see it. They look for the knockout punch, the flag planted on enemy soil, the moment when one side forces the other to kneel. That's what we've been conditioned to recognize as winning. But what if the most consequential strategic move a nation can make is the one that leaves no headlines? What if the real power play looks, from the outside, like doing absolutely nothing? Because right now, in the middle of one of the most volatile regions on Earth, something deeply counterintuitive is unfolding. And if you only follow the noise, the outrage, the punditry, the breaking news alerts, you will completely miss it. Let's talk about Iran, not the version you get on cable news, the strategic version, the one operating across decades, not news cycles. Iran exists in what military theorists would call a permanent threat environment. It shares borders or proximity with nations that have either been devastated by war, destabilized by foreign intervention, or are actively aligned against it. The Persian Gulf to its south is one of the most militarized bodies of water on the planet. Across the broader region, powerful states backed by even more powerful outside actors view Iranian influence as a direct threat to their interests. Layered on top of that geography is a relentless campaign of pressure that has run for decades. Economic sanctions that have hammered ordinary Iranian life, covert operations targeting its nuclear infrastructure, assassinations of its scientists and commanders, cyber attacks, proxy conflicts, and the permanent unspoken threat that a military confrontation could arrive at almost any time. This is not a country operating from a position of comfort. This is a country that has spent 40 years learning how to function under siege. So when you watch Iran appear to pull back when it seems to have leverage and doesn't fully press it, when it absorbs an attack and responds with something calibrated rather than catastrophic, the instinctive reaction from outside observers is to call it weakness, hesitation, a failure of resolve. That reaction reveals more about how we misunderstand strategy than it does about Iran. Here's the framework that actually matters. Every state, at every moment, faces a version of the same fundamental choice: escalate or endure. Escalation is seductive, it feels powerful, it generates momentum, it gives your domestic audience something to cheer. But escalation has a ceiling, and for a state like Iran, that ceiling comes fast. Iran has built real, meaningful strategic assets over decades. Its geography alone makes it extraordinarily difficult to occupy or subdue. Its asymmetric military capabilities, the kind designed not to fight a conventional war but to make any conventional war unbearably costly for the aggressor, represent years of deliberate investment. And its network of influence across Lebanon, Iraq, Yemen, and Syria creates what strategists call strategic depth, a web of leverage that cannot be neutralized from the air. These are genuine advantages, and this is the part that gets overlooked, they are advantages that only function within a specific range of conflict. They are designed for a sustained, grinding, asymmetric confrontation. They are not designed for a total war scenario where an overwhelmingly superior military force decides to stop holding back. The moment Iran forces its adversaries into that mode, the moment it pushes them to a point where restraint feels more dangerous than all-out response, its strategic advantages don't just weaken, they evaporate, and what remains is a state trying to survive against forces it was never built to defeat head-on. Iranian strategists understand this with precision, so they operate on a knife's edge. They apply pressure in doses carefully calibrated to stay below the threshold that triggers the kind of response that ends the game permanently. They demonstrate capability without forcing their opponents into a corner. They keep the conflict at a temperature where their tools are useful because they know what happens if the temperature rises beyond a certain point. From outside, this looks like blinking. It looks like a country that keeps getting close to victory and keeps pulling back at the last second. Inside the logic of long-term statecraft, it looks completely different. It looks like a country that has identified survival as the non-negotiable foundation of every other ambition and is protecting that foundation with discipline. The Cold War offers the clearest parallel in modern history. Two superpowers, each capable of annihilating the other, locked in a rivalry that lasted nearly half a century. They fought constantly, but always through proxies, always through indirect pressure, always through political maneuvering rather than direct military collision. Not because they lacked the will to fight. Korea, Vietnam, Angola, they demonstrated the will repeatedly, but because both sides grasped the same fundamental truth. The one thing that would guarantee either of them achieved their goals was a direct war between them. So they competed within a framework that preserved their ability to keep competing. That logic, compete fiercely, but protect the ability to keep competing, is exactly what Iran appears to be applying right now. And the global environment it's navigating is genuinely shifting. American strategic attention is increasingly split between the Middle East and the intensifying rivalry with China. The global energy landscape is changing in ways that alter old leverage equations across the developing world. New political alignments are forming that challenge the post-Cold War assumption of American dominance. The world is becoming more fragmented, more multipolar, and in that kind of environment, the patient actor often outperforms the aggressive one. The state that burns its resources on a dramatic confrontation at the wrong moment may find itself exhausted and isolated when the real opportunity finally arrives. The state that preserves its capacity, survives the pressure, and waits for conditions to improve may be far better positioned when the landscape finally shifts in its favor. None of this means Iran has quietly surrendered its ambitions. Strategic patience is not the same as strategic surrender. The goals: regional influence, reduced American footprint in the Middle East, recognition as the dominant power in its neighborhood, those haven't changed. What may have changed is the judgment about when and how to pursue them. That distinction matters enormously. Ambition without discipline is just recklessness. Ambition paired with the patience to wait for the right conditions, that is strategy in its most serious form. The hardest thing about watching geopolitics in real time is that it almost never delivers the clear, dramatic turning points we're psychologically wired to look for. The decisive moments often don't look decisive when they're happening. They look like inaction. They look like compromise. They look like the story going nowhere. But future historians have a habit of looking back at these quiet moments and realizing that the battle that defined an era was not the one that was fought. It was the one that a careful, disciplined actor chose not to fight because they saw clearly that fighting it on those terms at that moment would cost them everything. A state that survives today still holds cards tomorrow. A state that miscalculates today may not be around to play another hand. That asymmetry between what you gain by winning dramatically and what you lose by being destroyed is the equation that serious strategists never stop calculating. So the question that actually matters when evaluating what Iran is doing isn't whether it claimed victory in the last exchange. The question is whether it exits this moment with its critical capabilities intact, its strategic options preserved, and its long-term position unbroken. If the answer to that is yes, then what the world? Rida's retreat was something else entirely. It was positioning. And in the long game, the one measured not in battles but in decades, positioning is everything.